I always thought our life was pretty normal, or at least as normal as it gets in suburban America. My wife, Jessica, and I had been married for nearly 5 years. We had our ups and downs like any couple, but I never thought we would face something like this. I remember the day everything changed. It started off like any other. The sun was shining, the kids were outside playing, and I was in our cozy living room, sipping my morning coffee. Jessica had taken the kids to her mother's house for the weekend, leaving me with a few quiet hours to catch up on some much-needed work. It was during this rare moment of calm that I noticed something odd. I walked into the living room and spotted her old leather bag, the one she used for her yoga classes. It was slightly unzipped, and a piece of paper was sticking out. I pulled it out, expecting to find one of her workout schedules or a list of things to buy. Instead, it was a letter that looked like it had been hastily written and then folded. My heart began to race as I skimmed. Through it, it was filled with the kind of language you don't expect to see from your wife, words of intimacy, longing, and promises. It was clear that this was not just a casual note. I panicked. I shoved the letter back into her bag, suppressing the urge to scream. My mind was racing. I tried to push the thoughts away, to convince myself that I was overreacting. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. The laughter that used to echo through our house felt like it had faded, replaced by her long absences and late-night phone calls she often brushed off. I started to reflect on things I'd overlooked, moments I'd dismissed as nothing more than stress. That evening, I decided to confront her. When she returned, I had my heart racing and my stomach in knots. Jessica walked in, her hair slightly damp from the rain, as she greeted me with a casual "Hey, babe." The way she tossed her bag onto the couch felt disconnected, as if she were more focused on her phone than the fact that I was standing there, waiting for her. With a deep breath, I launched into my questions. "Jess, are you seeing someone else?" I just blurted it out, hoping to catch her off guard. She laughed at first, a sharp, almost mocking sound. "What, are you serious?" Her expression quickly shifted to one of irritation, as if I had accused her of something trivial. She began to fire off excuses, saying I was imagining things, that I was being paranoid. "You know I have a lot going on. You're just being dramatic," she said, rolling her eyes. But there was something in her voice, a defensiveness that only fueled my suspicions. The way she avoided eye contact made it all feel surreal, like I was watching a scene from a bad movie. My heart dropped as I felt the weight of betrayal settle in my chest. This was not the woman I had married. The woman I loved wouldn't lie to me like this. I could feel the anger boiling inside me, but I also felt a deep sadness overshadowing it. This was the love of my life, and here I was, standing in the wreckage of what used to be a happy marriage. The night dragged on in a suffocating silence, punctuated only by the clanging of pots in the kitchen as Jessica pretended everything was normal. I could see her frustration brewing as my mind raced through the implications of what I had found. I could no longer dismiss the changes. I felt trapped, swinging between disbelief and the gut-wrenching reality of potential loss. My brain was a whirlwind of anger, sadness, and confusion, and all I wanted was for everything to go back to the way it used to be. But deep down, I knew that was impossible now. As the night deepened, I wrestled with my emotions, trying to find clarity in the chaos. The bond that I thought was unbreakable suddenly felt fragile, dangling by a thread. I had to make a decision, one that would define the rest of my life. But how could I move forward from here? The days that followed my confrontation with Jessica felt like a blur. I was walking through a haze, trying to keep my composure while the tension in our house grew thicker. Jessica acted as if everything was fine, throwing herself into her usual routines, cooking dinner, making school lunches, and even baking cookies to bring to the kids' school. But I could see behind her forced smiles. When she thought I wasn't looking, her face would twist in a way that told me all was not well. I spent sleepless nights tossing and turning, my mind replaying our conversations over and over. I couldn't shake the image of that letter from her bag. The words echoed in my head. I had to know for sure if my suspicions were correct. I enlisted the help of a friend, Dave, who was always good at seeing through the fog of emotions. We had been friends since college, and he had that natural knack for putting things into perspective. I reluctantly shared my fears and what I had found. His reaction was immediate, urging me to confront Jess again or at the very least, find more evidence. "Dude, you've got to protect yourself," he said, his brow furrowed in concern. "You can't just let this slide. If she's cheating, you need to know. You deserve to have the truth." His words rang true, and I realized I couldn't let this go on. I returned home and decided to do some digging on my own. It felt wrong, like I was breaking some unwritten code, but I needed answers. I started by checking her phone when she wasn't around. I knew it was a breach of trust, but my heart was racing with desperation. I found her phone sitting on the kitchen counter, screen lit up with a text message notification. Against my better judgment, I picked it up. My hands trembled as I unlocked it with the password I had seen her use numerous times. My stomach dropped as I scrolled through her messages. There it was, a string of texts with someone named Mark. The messages were flirtatious, filled with emojis and inside jokes I had never heard of. They exchanged plans to meet up, and my stomach churned as I read things like, "Can't wait to see you tonight, and last time was incredible." I felt sick. My whole body was on fire with betrayal and rage. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. She was lying to me, and she had been for a while. I couldn't contain my anger anymore. I slammed the phone down, and as if on cue, Jessica entered the room, her eyes widening in surprise. "What's wrong?" she asked, feigning innocence. I shot her a look that could have burned a hole through steel. "What's wrong? You tell me. Who the hell is Mark?" Her face turned pale, and for the first time I saw real fear in her eyes. "What? I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, but I wasn't having it. "Don't play games with me, Jess. I saw the texts. I know what you've been doing." Her facade crumbled, and for a moment the defiant wife I had known vanished. "It's not what you think," she protested, her voice rising in pitch. "He's just a friend, I swear." I couldn't believe her. "Just a friend? You think I'm that naive? You're having an affair, aren't you?" I felt a whirlwind of emotions crashing over me, the anger, the sadness, but mostly an overwhelming sense of betrayal. She shifted uncomfortably, rubbing her neck, a nervous habit I'd noticed before. "Look, I didn't want you to find out like this. It was just a mistake," she tried to explain, her voice shaky. "We were having issues and I was lonely." "Lonely? You did think telling me might help. Instead, you chose to sleep with another guy." My voice was sharp, cutting through the air like a knife. Her eyes brimmed with tears, but I found it hard to feel any sympathy. "Please, can we talk about this calmly?" she pleaded. Calmly. My world felt like it was crumbling, and I was supposed to be calm. I wanted to scream, to throw things, to break something. I felt betrayed not just by her actions, but by the woman I thought I knew. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again," I said, my voice trembling with emotion. "You've shattered everything we built. Just give me a chance to explain. I made a mistake," she said, her voice rising in desperation. But I was already tuning her out, my heart pounding in my chest. The emotional weight of the moment was unbearable. I was standing on the precipice of a decision that would change everything. I needed to choose whether to fight for our marriage or to cut my losses and walk away. My mind was racing with the implications, and I could feel the tears pricking at the corners of my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I was done playing the fool. In that moment, I knew something had to change. The journey I was on was no longer about saving our marriage. It was about finding clarity in the chaos. The love I felt for this woman was still buried beneath layers of betrayal and hurt, but trust was a fragile thing, and I was beginning to wonder if it could ever be rebuilt. I had to think about what I wanted for my future and what I was willing to endure. With that realization, my mind turned toward revenge. I didn't want to just walk away without leaving a mark. I couldn't let her think she could betray me without consequences. The gears in my head began to turn as I plotted my next move. I wanted her to feel what I was feeling, the pain, the betrayal, and the desperation. I would not be the one left broken. No, I would make sure she understood just how deep this wound ran. I spent the next few days in a haze of anger and betrayal, the initial shock giving way to a cold, calculated resolve. I was determined not to let Jessica's infidelity define me, but I also wanted her to understand the gravity of her actions. Revenge, to me, was not about destruction or chaos. It was about making her feel the weight of her decisions while I figured out how to reclaim my sense of self. During this time, I took a step back and began to observe her more closely. Jessica was still acting like everything was normal, still trying to play the role of the devoted wife. I watched her interactions, her phone habits, and the way she darted nervous glances when I walked into the room. It was clear that she was unsettled, and I decided to capitalize on that tension. I knew I had to be smart about this. I started by gathering evidence, documenting her behavior, and keeping a log of the times she went out or received strange calls. I set up an alternate email account and began to communicate with Mark, her lover, without revealing my identity. I posed as a woman who had recently met Jessica at a yoga class, claiming that Jessica had spoken highly of him. I was curious to see how far this deception would go and if Mark would play along or if he would be honest about what he was to her. The response was quick. Mark replied enthusiastically, sharing that he had enjoyed their last encounter and was eager to meet again. He mentioned a specific weekend that they were planning to spend together. This was the confirmation I needed. Jessica was not just flirting, she was deeply involved with him. I felt a surge of anger, but I channeled it into my plan rather than letting it overwhelm me. The following week, I seized the opportunity to confront her again, this time armed with undeniable evidence. When Jessica came home from work, I sat her down, my heart pounding with anticipation. "We need to talk," I said, my tone serious. The look on her face told me she knew what was coming. "Not again," she groaned, her expression shifting from anxious to defensive. "Can't we just put this behind us?" "Put what behind us? Your affair?" I shot back, presenting her with the printed email exchanges I had between myself and Mark. "What's this, Jess? You can deny it all you want, but this is proof." Her eyes widened as she snatched the papers from me, reading them with disbelief. "Where did you get this?" she stammered, her voice trembling. "Does it matter? The truth is right in front of you. You're not just some poor, lonely housewife. You're a cheater." My voice dripped with disdain. Jessica's facade broke. "It's not what you think. I was going to end it, I swear." "End it? That's a classic line," I replied, unswayed by her tears. "You thought I wouldn't find out. You've been lying to me, Jess." We went back and forth, and every excuse she tried to throw at me felt like a slap in the face. "I was looking for something, and I didn't know how to talk to you about it. You've been so distant," she cried, but I couldn't bear to hear it. "Distant? You spent nights with another man, Jessica, while I was here thinking everything was fine." My voice cracked, and I felt the tears threaten again, but I swallowed them back. The confrontation spiraled, and for every lie she told, I found myself feeling more and more empowered. The rage inside me morphed into something more potent, a determination to reclaim my life. I realized that I wasn't just fighting for our marriage, I was fighting for myself. When her tears subsided, Jessica finally admitted to the affair. "I messed up, okay, but can't we just work through this?" Her plea felt hollow, and I shook my head, a bitter smile on my face. "No, it's too late. You've already made your choice." In that moment, I made a decision. I would not just let this slide. I wanted her to feel the pain of betrayal, the way I had felt when I discovered her infidelity. I planned to expose her to Mark, to show him exactly what kind of woman he was involved with. I was going to take my anger and turn it into something that would serve me. As I sat there, watching her try to regain her composure, I realized I had a new sense of clarity. I was no longer the victim. I was the one in control now. I would meet Mark in person, but I wouldn't just leave it at that. I had a plan to show Jessica that I wouldn't be the one to suffer in silence. With every step I took, I felt stronger. I was going to do this for me, to reclaim my dignity and self-worth. It was time for her to face the consequences of her choices, and I was more than willing to orchestrate a situation that would do just that. Jessica had burned our relationship to the ground, and now I was ready to light a fire of my own. With my resolve solidified, I set out to execute my plan. I decided to confront Mark directly, to lay everything out on the table. I crafted a message that was both inviting and ominous, using the email account I'd set up to correspond with him. I casually suggested we meet at a local coffee shop, under the pretense of discussing Jessica. I wanted him to know the truth, and I wanted him to feel the weight of his involvement in our crumbling marriage. When I arrived at the cafe, my heart raced with anticipation. I was a mix of emotions, anxiety, anger, but mostly a sense of empowerment. As I waited at a corner table, I rehearsed what I would say in my mind. I wanted to be calm, collected, and most importantly, impactful. I was about to drop a bombshell that could shatter his world just as Jessica had shattered mine. When Mark walked in, I recognized him immediately. He was handsome in a way that made my stomach turn, the kind of guy who seemed full of himself. He scanned the room until his eyes finally landed on me. I gestured for him to come over and he approached, a confident swagger in his step. "Hey, you must be the girl from yoga," he said, a smirk on his face. "Jessica mentioned you." I forced a smile, fighting the urge to roll my eyes. "Yeah, about that we need to talk." He plopped down across from me, his expression turning serious. "What's going on?" I took a deep breath, knowing I needed to be straightforward. "I'm her husband," I said, watching his face go pale. "And I know about you and Jessica." His smug demeanor shattered instantly. "What are you talking about?" I slid the printed emails across the table, watching as his eyes widened and his confidence drained away. "These are from last week. You think she's only been telling you lies? She's been lying to me too." Mark looked confused, like a deer caught in headlights. "I didn't know she was married. She never mentioned it." I leaned in closer, my voice low but steady. "Well, now you do. She's been cheating on me with you while pretending to be a loving wife. How does that feel?" Mark gulped, and for a moment I reveled in the look of horror on his face. "I thought she was single. She told me she was going through a rough patch." "Did she tell you that she was out with her friend?" While I was left wondering where she was, I shot back, my anger simmering just beneath the surface. "I swear I didn't know. This is insane," he stammered, his bravado crumbling. The satisfaction of seeing him squirm felt good, but I had more to say. "You know what? It doesn't matter if you had no idea. You made a choice to be with her, and that choice has consequences. She shattered our family, and now you're not walking away unscathed." Mark's initial shock began to morph into anger as he leaned back in his seat. "Look, man, I didn't mean for any of this to happen. If she lied to you, that's on her, not me." "Is it, though? You had a hand in this, too. You could have asked questions, but you didn't. You chose to take advantage of a situation without considering the fallout." The conversation took a turn, and I felt the power shift in my favor. I was no longer the victim. I was the one calling the shots. "I want you to tell her you know. I want you to confront her and make sure she understands that her actions have consequences. I'm not going to let this slide without her feeling the pain." Mark looked uncertain, shifting uncomfortably in his chair. "You really think she'll care?" "Oh, she'll care. Believe me." With that, I got up to leave. I had made my point, and I felt a sense of closure wash over me that I didn't expect. I had confronted the man who invaded my marriage, and in that moment I felt stronger than I had in weeks. As I left the cafe, my phone buzzed with a message from Jessica. It was a simple, "How did your meeting go?" I felt a surge of adrenaline and decided this was the moment to turn the tables. Instead of answering her directly, I texted back, "You should ask Mark." I could almost picture her face as confusion washed over her. I wanted her to panic, to understand that I was no longer the passive husband she could take for granted. I walked home with a newfound sense of power, ready to face her once again. When I entered the house, Jessica was in the kitchen, her back turned to me as she prepared dinner. I could sense her tension, and I knew she was waiting for my response to her earlier message. I took a moment to collect my thoughts before stepping into the room. "I met Mark today," I said, my voice steady. Her shoulders tensed and she turned to face me, eyes wide with disbelief. "What, you met him? Why would you do that?" "Because I needed to know the truth, Jessica, and I got it. You need to understand that this is just going to blow over. You're going to face the repercussions of your choices." Her face paled as she processed my words. "What do you mean?" "Mark knows. I told him everything. He's going to confront you, and I hope you're ready for it." In that moment, I saw the realization hit her like a freight train. Her, the woman who had burned letters in the fireplace and brushed off my concerns, was now facing the reality of her actions. The veneer of control she had maintained began to crack. "Why would you do this?" she asked, her voice shaking. "Because you deserve to feel the pain you've caused. I'm not just going to stand by while you continue to lie and manipulate. You need to face the consequences of your actions. Tears began to form in her eyes, but I steeled myself against any pity. This isn't about sympathy, Jess. This is about you understanding what you've done. I walked away, feeling a mix of satisfaction and sorrow. I had taken a stand, and for the first time, I felt like I was reclaiming my narrative. The emotional turmoil was far from over, but I was ready to face whatever came next, armed with clarity and strength. Jessica had chosen this path, and now it was time for her to reckon with the choices she had made. I was no longer the one left in the dark. I was finally stepping into the light. The atmosphere in the house was thick with tension after I confronted Jessica about my meeting with Mark. I had unleashed a storm, and I could sense her turmoil as she processed the reality of her situation. I went into my home office, trying to focus on work, but my mind kept drifting back to the chaos unfolding in our lives. I felt a mix of anticipation and dread at what would happen when Mark confronted her. After a few hours of restless waiting, I heard raised voices coming from the living room. Mark had arrived. I quickly pushed my chair back and made my way toward the sound, my heart pounding in my chest. I wanted to be there when Jessica faced the consequences of her actions. As I approached, I could hear snippets of their conversation. "Why didn't you tell me you were married?" Mark's voice was strained, laced with anger and confusion. Jessica responded defensively. "I didn't think it would matter. I was leaving him, I swear." I paused just outside the doorway, listening intently. I was both a spectator and an active participant in the emotional fallout of my marriage. Part of me wanted to barge in and confront them, but I held back, allowing the confrontation to unfold as it would. "Leaving him? You were still with him while we were seeing each other." Mark's tone escalated, and I could almost visualize the look of betrayal on his face. "You played me for a fool." I was confused. I didn't know what I wanted. Jessica cried, her voice breaking. I stepped into the room, and the moment I did, both of them turned to me. Jessica's eyes widened, and I caught a glimpse of panic mixed with guilt. Mark looked caught between anger and surprise. "Looks like the truth is finally coming out," I said, my voice steady despite the tumult inside me. "Mark, you deserve to know exactly what kind of person you're dealing with." Jessica shot me an incredulous look. "You didn't have to come in here. This is between us." I couldn't help but scoff. "This is between all of us, Jess. You wanted to play games, and now the truth is out in the open." Mark's gaze bounced between the two of us, clearly struggling with the weight of the situation. "I can't believe this. You lied to me from the start. You said you were unhappy and needed someone to talk to." "Because I was," she exclaimed, desperation creeping into her voice. "I thought I could figure it out. I didn't mean for it to get this far." I interjected, "But it did get this far, didn't it? You betrayed not only your marriage but also the trust of someone who believed your lies. You need to own that." Mark stood there, fists clenched, and the hurt in his eyes was palpable. "I thought we had something real, Jess. I thought you wanted to be with me." Jessica's shoulders slumped, and she seemed to lose her bravado. "I didn't mean to hurt you, but I was trying to escape my life. I thought you were my way out." The words hung heavily in the air, a stark reminder of the tangled web of lies that had ensnared all of us. I felt a surge of anger for both of them. Jessica had dragged Mark into our mess, and Mark had been naive to think he wasn't part of the fallout. "Mark, you need to understand," I said, my voice firm. "Jessica made her choices. You may have thought you were having an affair with a single woman, but she was still my wife." Mark's frustration turned to realization, and he took a step back, shaking his head. "I don't want any part of this. I'm done." "Good," I replied, wanting to ensure he knew his worth wasn't tied to her lies. "You deserve better than being someone's escape plan." Mark turned to leave but paused at the door, looking back at Jessica one last time. "I hope you figure your life out," he said, his voice low and tinged with sadness before he walked out. As the door closed behind him, the weight of silence fell over the room. Jessica broke down, her tears flowing freely as she sank onto the couch. "What have I done?" she sobbed. Burying her face in her hands, I stood there, torn between anger and pity. Part of me wanted to feel sorry for her, to comfort her, but another part wanted to relish the chaos she had created. "You've destroyed everything," I said, my voice cold. "You've played with fire, and now you're left with the ashes." Her sobs continued, but I felt no sympathy. "You wanted to be free. Look where it's gotten you," I said, pacing the room. You've lost the man who truly loved you. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I'm so sorry, she pleaded, her voice cracking. I thought I could find happiness again. Happiness? You thought cheating would bring you happiness. I couldn't mask the bitterness in my tone. You've broken trust in the most fundamental way. How do you expect me to forgive this? Her eyes filled with anguish as she looked at me. I love you. I never wanted to hurt you. I don't even know who you are anymore, I said, my heart aching but resolute. You've lied and betrayed not just me but also yourself. Love doesn't lie. Jess, it doesn't cheat. The confrontation felt draining, and I realized I needed to step away for a moment. I left the room to gather my thoughts, feeling the weight of the situation crushing me. I couldn't believe the chaos that had unfolded within such a short time. As I stood outside on our porch, the cool evening air filled my lungs, and I took a moment to think. This was my chance to redefine what I wanted moving forward, to decide what my future would look like. I had to make a choice, not just about whether to forgive Jessica but also about whether I could trust her again. After a few minutes of solitude, I steeled myself for the conversation that lay ahead. When I returned to the living room, Jessica was sitting on the couch, her eyes red and puffy. I need time to figure this out, I said, taking a deep breath. I don't know if I can stay in this marriage after what you've done. Her face fell, and I could see the realization sinking in. Please don't leave me. I want to fix this. Just give me a chance. I shook my head. It's not that simple anymore. You've shattered my trust, and trust is the foundation of any relationship. Without it, I don't know if we can ever go back. As I stepped away, I felt a mixture of sadness and relief. I was finally facing the reality of our situation, and though the path ahead was uncertain, I was ready to confront it. I would take this time to reflect on what I wanted, to reclaim my life from the ashes, and decide if there was any way to salvage what was left of our marriage. The following days were a blur of emotions as I tried to process everything that had happened. I found myself drifting through our home like a ghost, caught between the love I once felt for Jessica and the deep betrayal that now colored every interaction. I could see her trying to reach out, attempting to bridge the chasm that had opened between us, but every time she did, it felt like salt on a fresh wound. I needed space, time to think about what I wanted for my future. I decided to stay with my brother for a while. He lived a few hours away, and I thought a change of scenery might help me regain my focus. I packed a bag, leaving behind the memories and reminders of a life that felt shattered. Jessica offered to help, but I told her it was better if I went alone. The drive to my brother's house was filled with introspection. I replayed the events in my mind, analyzing every moment, every detail that led us to this point. I felt a mix of anger and sadness. It was painful to realize how far our relationship had fallen. I missed the woman I thought I knew, the one I had built a life with. But the truth was undeniable. She had chosen her path, and it had led her away from me. When I arrived at my brother's house, he welcomed me with open arms. "You look like you've been through hell," he said, concern etched on his face. I filled him in on the details, sharing the story of Jessica's betrayal and my subsequent confrontation with Mark. He listened attentively, offering support without judgment. "Take your time to figure things out," he advised. "You don't have to rush back into anything. Focus on yourself for a while." And that's what I did. I spent the next few weeks working through my emotions, taking long walks, hitting the gym, and spending quality time with my brother and his family. It felt good to step away from the chaos, to breathe in the fresh air without the weight of Jessica's betrayal hanging over me. I even found solace in journaling, pouring my thoughts onto paper in an attempt to make sense of the turmoil. As the days turned into weeks, I began to gain clarity. I realized that while my marriage was important to me, I also needed to prioritize my own well-being. I couldn't allow myself to be defined by someone else's choices. One evening, after a long day of reflection, I felt ready to face Jessica again. I called her, and when she answered, I could hear the mix of hope and anxiety in her voice. "Are you coming home?" "I think it's time we talked," I replied, feeling a sense of determination wash over me. When I returned home, the atmosphere was markedly different. The house felt emptier, the silence echoing the weight of our situation. Jessica was waiting for me in the living room, her expression a mixture of anxiety and longing. "Thank you for coming back," she said softly, her voice trembling. I nodded, taking a deep breath. "We need to have a serious conversation about what happened, about us." She glanced down, her eyes welling with tears. "I know I've made mistakes and I'm so sorry. I've spent the last few weeks thinking about everything. I realize how much I've hurt you and I don't want to lose you." I could see the sincerity in her eyes, but I also felt the weight of the betrayal still looming heavily between us. "Jessica, I want you to understand something. Trust is fragile and you broke that trust. I need to know that you're willing to put in the work to rebuild it." "I will do anything," she pleaded. "I want to make this right. I've been seeing a therapist, trying to understand my actions and why I made those choices. I'll fight for us." Her words sounded genuine, but I also knew that change wouldn't happen overnight. "It's going to take time, Jess. I won't be able to just forget what happened. We'll need to communicate openly and honestly if we're going to move forward." She nodded vigorously, her eyes filled with determination. "I promise to be transparent with you. I'll do whatever it takes to regain your trust." As we talked, I felt a flicker of hope for the first time in weeks. It didn't erase the pain, but it opened the door for healing. We discussed boundaries and expectations, acknowledging that rebuilding our relationship would be a journey full of ups and downs. It wasn't easy, but we slowly began to navigate our way back to each other. It required patience, honesty, and a willingness to confront the pain head-on. We started attending couples therapy, which provided a safe space to air our grievances and work through our issues. Through it all, I learned that healing doesn't mean forgetting. I discovered the importance of self-love and the need to prioritize my own happiness. I found strength in vulnerability and allowed myself to lean on Jessica as we both navigated the aftermath of her betrayal. As the weeks turned into months, we began to rebuild our relationship from the ground up. It was a long road and I knew it would take time, but I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I was no longer the victim of her choices. I had taken charge of my life, and I was determined to create a future that honored both my healing and our potential as a couple. I learned that love, while powerful, is also complex. It requires effort, honesty, and resilience. Moving forward, I held on to the lessons I'd learned, that trust is earned, not given, and that true love can withstand even the most difficult of trials if both parties are willing to work together. In the end, while the journey was far from perfect, I found solace in knowing that I had fought for my own happiness, and in doing so, I had given our marriage a chance to heal.